afternoon. We'd like to welcome Jules today to our podcast, our series of podcasts that we're doing. Lovely to meet you, Jules. You come from an acute hospital in England, and would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more, please?
Thank you, Bev, for having me. Yeah, my name's Jules Lewis, and I'm a Swan end-of-life care facilitator and lead nurse. So in a large acute hospital covering 2 sites. So yeah, and I've been a qualified nurse now. Well, I've been nursing. The day I started my training was almost 34 years ago now. So I've got, a long career there, and started as an SEN in Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt on the spinal injuries unit, worked there for 10 years and then moved to work around the county in the community, and then found my passion really in end-of-life care, worked in the community doing that, and now at an acute trust and been there for, gosh, it's getting on for 8.5 to 9 years soon. Yeah, so really enjoy my role. It's a real privilege.
Yes, I'm say it's well, working in the NHS is a privilege most of the time, isn't it? Because it's something that we all love doing, and you choose it, and particularly palliative end of life care. I think it's something that you've got to want to do and have that passion and that desire to work with people at the end of the life. It is, as you say, it's a privilege to work with people at that time. So now we wanted to talk about some of your experience with regards to improving palliative and end of life care, because obviously, as we all know, you only have one chance to get it right, and so getting our colleagues and our teams to work and to provide the best end of life care can be quite challenging at times. So to give a bit of background to your hospital, that how many beds do you have in your acute hospital, and what's palliative end of life care like within your area?
Yeah, so we've got over 2 sites, and there's sort of about 16 to 18 miles between the sites, which is always a challenge. About 800 beds. It keeps on changing, so I'll say around 800 beds because that does keep on changing. But I certainly, when I went to work at the trust, it was a new post, so that I was the first person to come into post, and I was working under the corporate team, but working very closely with the palliative care team. So I was just one person, and I was actually funded by Health Education West Midlands at the time as well for a couple of years, and then the post became permanent. And really working closely with, as I say, with the palliative care team, the bereavement team, and we had a lead consultant as well. And I found out about the SWAN model of care from the wonderful creator Fiona Murphy, who implemented the SWAN model of care in Manchester hospitals. And I got in touch with her very early on into my role and asked her, would it be okay to implement at the hospital? And she very kindly acted as a bit of a mentor and supported and came to talk at conferences. And a year later, we introduced the SWAN model of care into our trust. It's in a lot of trusts now, but we were one of the early implementers. So we adapted that to have our own spin on it, because obviously we wanted to make it our own. So we had memory boxes and SWAN bags to gift relatives, and we started designing SWAN rooms. So a SWAN room would be a side room, and it can always be used, but the idea is that if you've got an end-of-life care patient, someone in their last hours and days on the ward, you would try to get them in that SWAN room. We paint them in SWAN colours, which is blue and grey. We have a nice picture as a focal point on the wall, and we try and put skylights in as well to make it homely. And we would have a mood light, a nice chair for relatives to sit in, and CD players to play their favourite music. So it's supposed to be bringing home to hospital, if you like, more like the idea of a hospice. And we encourage relatives to bring in items from home. It might be their own pillow, or it might be pictures, and try and make the room look a little bit more like home. And if we always try and find out what's important to the person. So we've had situations where I was supporting a patient who actually wanted to go home for end of life care, and I realised very quickly that I felt she was too unwell to go the distance because she lived in a different county. And when I spoke to the family what it was about why she wanted to go home, the reason was that she wanted to see her dog and be with her dog. So the thing we did was obviously was get the dog to her, and we managed to do that safely. We got a pet passport, so we talked to the ward manager, we made it happen, and a few hours later she died. But she'd had her wish. So sometimes it's not always about home and being at home. It might be the garden, it might be, seeing the dog, or taste for pleasure and things that they might not think they can do in a hospital setting. But it's all about, the Swan model of care is all about breaking the rules that don't exist. So it's about finding out what's important to the person, because we've got one chance to get it right, and making it happen, working together to make it happen.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. We chatted as one of our podcasts with the Cinnamon Trust this week, and that is a trust that it very much looks after animals, and when somebody is either elderly or at the end of life. And they gave exactly a very similar example of taking a lady's horse to her when she was dying, because she really wanted to see her horse before she died. And yeah, we underestimate the power of pets sometimes, don't we, and animals, and how, like I say, sometimes it's not the expected things that are most important to somebody. And that's why advanced care planning and having those conversations is so important, isn't it, to find out what it is that is important to the patient.
It is, absolutely. And if the patient is supported, and they should be when they're diagnosed at end of life, the last hours and days, by a end of life care plan, a SWAN care plan, then all that information needs to be in there, what's important to the person, and making sure that, we've taken that on board and done all we can to make it happen. I mean, we have had some situations where we've had a patient wanted to get married at end of life, and we made that happen. And that happened during the pandemic, which was, I look back now and I think, how on earth did we make it happen? Because when I walked out of that side room, it was absolute chaos. But in that side room, later that day, we had a wedding, and it was just incredible to be part of that, and the whole team working together. And it gave the team a real boost during the height of the pandemic. And, we managed to get photographs, and the bride and groom saw the photographs before, sadly, the bride died. But they were able to share those moments, and how the staff work together to make it happen, from the catering department, getting flowers, and having those witnesses was tricky because of the pandemic. But thanks to the registrar office and our chaplaincy team and everybody, really, we made it happen. And, I spoke to the groom quite soon after that, and I've been in touch with him again recently, and the joy, and he's so proud of, of the organisation, really. And he did write to the chief exec, which I thought was lovely of him, just to say, it was in the middle of the hardest time we've ever been through, wasn't it? These unprecedented times, and we made it happen, and it was joyful. Yeah.
Oh yes, well done, because that must have been incredibly difficult, given the fact, I mean, I know at the time I was working clinically, and it is we didn't really know what we were doing. So it was chaotic, exactly as you say, best description for it. So that's lovely that you managed to sort something out, and for that patient and her husband, sorry, I guess that's a lovely lasting memory now for him, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned very briefly on when you were talking about the Swan Room about taste for pleasure as well. Was that I guess another initiative that links in with the Swan?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was one of our volunteers as well. She sat with a patient at end of life when family needed to go home and have a break, and she saw nil by mouth written on the board behind the patient's bed, and it really upset her. And we never said nil by mouth, and it was not language that we would use. However, to see that just upset her, and felt that would really upset the family, that they can't give her anything thing orally now. So we talked about it, and our lovely volunteer, who's also called Jules, she did a blog, and we actually designed Taste for Pleasure. And I'm not saying that it was a new thing, because I'm sure lots and lots of people, certainly hospices, I've been doing it for many years in my nursing career, but I think we were brave to take it to board, to explain what Taste for Pleasure was all about, which is making sure the mouth has got good mouth care and clean mouth, and then popping a little swab into somebody's favourite flavour, shaking off the excess and popping it round the lips, and being able to smell and taste their favourite flavour. That might be tea, coffee, Coke, which is easy to obtain from the ward kitchen, but it might be something a little bit stronger, which could be whiskey, Prosecco, gin and tonic, which we've had, and family bring that in. So we were brave to take it to the board. Board members, exec members were very upset hearing the stories and could not say no. We really hit them in the heart, really. And we designed a SOP, a safe operation procedure, so that we could make sure that this could be done by everybody. But as I say, not that we were going to be bringing in alcohol, that the patients' loved ones would bring in favourite flavours, and we would follow the SOP to make sure it's safe and kind. And it's supposed to be pleasurable. So if it becomes not pleasurable, then it obviously is stopped. But to allow somebody to have something rather than say nil by mouth, it's a much more positive term, isn't it? Taste for Pleasure. And I will never forget a family whose mum was dying, and she loved Prosecco. She wasn't somebody that would drink much at all, but she loved a glass of Prosecco. And we knew that time was limited with this lady, and I didn't want them to even go across to the shop to go and buy Prosecco, because I was concerned that they may not be present when she died if they did that. So I took it upon myself to raid the wedding bag, because I knew there's always a bottle of Prosecco in there. And they all had a glass of Prosecco with her, and I did her Taste for Pleasure. And the memories of that, and that family donate £20 to the Swan Fund every year. And it's almost like they're saying, put another bottle of Prosecco in the wedding bag. And it's just incredible how that family get in touch with us every single year. And the memories of that are just wonderful for that family. And I'm sure they, frequently have a little raise a glass of Prosecco to lovely mum.
Oh yes, and I think what you sort of alluded to there is actually that for those that don't care for somebody at end of life, they don't realise that it's the simple things that are really important. So like you say, your hospital board wouldn't necessarily understand, and so it's great, isn't it, to have the opportunity to explain to them about how important that might be to somebody, so that it puts them in somebody else's shoes for that couple of minutes to understand. And the other thing that I guess that for me, that linking to that is very much about the change of culture, because I've been a nurse for 20 years as well, and that change of culture about that nil by mouth is the way that people have been cared for in the past, and we know all the issues with the livable care pathway many years ago. But actually supporting somebody to eat and drink, it takes time for that change of culture and for people to feel confident. And I'm sure there are many other elements of what you've done over the years around cultural changes that takes time, and that you're probably very pleased that have changed now. But
yeah, absolutely. And end of life care is everybody's business. So it may not be everybody's responsibility, as in, if you work in estates, it's not your responsibility. But our estates team, our cleaners, our porters, everybody, can make a difference in end of life care. And, we do need the chief exec to be on board. We need that person to share the messages across the organisation. But, the estates team, they ring me regularly because they support us with our swan rooms. They're so keen to get in there and paint them and put the skylights in and help. And it's a real team approach. And I think it's about valuing them, because they do go above and beyond, you know, and the domestics, the you know, the cleaners, the housekeepers, everybody can play a part in end of life care, and it's just incredible what you can, you know, what can happen if you all work together. And we have one chance to get it right, don't we? So it's about working together to make it happen, and you know, cut out some of the red tape, really. And as long as it's safe and kind to do so, and we've got things in place to make sure of that, then it is about breaking the rules that don't exist, because people don't think they can bring a dog in, and they certainly don't think that they could bring in a little bottle of beer. But we can make it happen, and it's so important, and those memories live on, don't they, in the people left behind. So yeah, I just love what I do. It's such a privilege.
No, exactly. And I think, like I say, sharing those patient experience stories with everybody is really important, because there's little pockets of great practice that happen every day in our hospitals, in you know, on a ward, and it's sharing that experience, isn't it? Which is sometimes it's hard to get the what went really well, because obviously we know we don't always get palliative end of life care right, and you know, there is always room for improvement, and not everybody will have the best experience that we can give. And it's sometimes it's very easy to articulate what didn't go so well, but it is much harder to articulate what we did well. So it's really important to share both, isn't it, to give a balanced view, and to keep that learning fresh and constant, so that everybody always wants to do the best that they can.
Yeah,
One of the areas that
definitely.
I know you did some work on was around your mortuary at the hospital, which is obviously, for a lot of people, is probably not an area that they would think of that you would need to do improvements on. But as you and I both know, that it's that last experience, isn't it, of when you come to a hospital for that patient's journey. So tell us a little bit about what you did there.
Yeah. So that was back in when I started, really, and I went for a visit to the mortuary, and it just upset me, really. And the manager there at the time was upset, really, showing me round, and there wasn't that pride in the area, because it was very much a functional room, but it looked like many families could be in the same room together, even though that wasn't the case. But the amount of chairs and a desk in there, it was very basic, and it wasn't a pleasant place to be. And I tried to put myself in the position of being a family member and walking in their shoes, and just felt, well, I would not want to come here to visit my loved one, to say goodbye to my loved one. I would just try and discourage people to come here. And I thought that was so wrong. And we were trying to allow families to visit their loved ones on the ward to say goodbye when they died, because that is a nicer place for them to visit them, because they know the staff, and the staff can support them. But if they're not there at the time, or they can't get to the hospital that same day, we do need to be able to encourage people to go and say their goodbyes, and not discourage them, and not have to wait till they go to the funeral home. So we set about, and the director of nursing at the time was just so supportive, and our quality manager as well. And we got a little pot of money together, and we did almost like a Nick Knowles makeover. And it was just incredible. And we actually didn't allow the mortuary manager to come in till we'd finished, and it literally was that makeover of, you know, a couple of days. And he was close to tears when he walked through the door. I'll never forget it. And we showed people round, and the difference is a couple of £1,000 made just to the furniture, to put pictures up, paint walls. The children's room was the most upsetting for me. It felt like almost like a cupboard with a bed in, if I'm honest, and it upset me. Just, it was unbelievable. And now it's just lovely. We got quilts for children and adults, fleece blankets, and we painted the walls, and there's even stars on the ceiling now, because we've had a major refurbishment in the mortuary now, but this was just incredible. And all that furniture is still in the new build, but it allowed us to encourage people to come in and be proud of our area, and seeing the staff showing other staff round and being proud of the environment was just amazing, really. Made such a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I completely can understand that, having, you know, as I having come from an acute hospital, that area it's a very important part of that patient and family experience, but too often it's at the back end of the hospital, and it's tucked out the way, and I completely agree that we did a very similar thing where I came from, just spending some money to make it look a little bit more warm and welcoming, because they do a great job in looking after our patients after death. Yes, very similar. Ours needed a bit of TLC to bring it up, and it was lovely, because I say it also makes the staff feel more valued. They do provide a really good experience for the family and care for those patients, so it's nice to have supported them to deliver the best that they can.
Yeah, I'm working with the mortuary at the moment. Actually, I'm doing some bereavement sessions with them, and we're going through kind language and trying to improve the way in which we talk to bereaved relatives, and the words that some undertakers and maybe police and other professions use that might not be so kind, but it might be that they're using them to distance themselves from what is happening. So we're trying to encourage people to say the person's name, you know, after they've died as well, and say, would you like to visit mum to say goodbye, rather than what some people may use is view the body, which to me is just so upsetting. So it's so important that we use kind language, and around suicide as well, that we use somebody's taken their own life, or you know, the person is bereaved by suicide rather than commit suicide. So we're doing a lot of work with the mortuary staff, and we've designed a little card that they can have in their pocket, because, you know, they may have been trained to use these words years ago, but things have moved on, and it's about making sure that we have in our toolbox really some phrases to help us. And we can't, you know, tell people what to say, but we can sort of suggest that you consider these words, because they're deemed to be kinder words than maybe others. So we're working really hard with that as well, and I'm very keen to support the staff when they come back to work following a bereavement. We've set up a service to support staff, and it's about peer support really, and we've even set up some staff bereavement support cafes, because if we look after our staff when they've had a bereavement, then they're more likely to signpost bereaved relatives, and you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you look after us, we're able to then care for others, but our staff are our best asset, so we really need to look after them, and it's really important.
I mean, and obviously Dying Matters Week this year, that is exactly what the theme is, isn't it? About supporting staff in their own bereavement, or whatever they might be involved in, because,
Yeah,
regardless of your own bereavement, we know that burnout, particularly on some of our areas of specialism, is very high, isn't it? Because of the nature of the work that they do, you know, particularly within our palliative care teams in hospitals. So it's supporting them, isn't it, to be able to do that. So I think, yes, it's nice to have a different angle for Dying Matters this week, because a lot of the time it's around talking and planning and living, which doesn't change. That's really important, but I think it's lovely to see a sort of a focus on the workplace, because it's where we spend a lot of our time, many of us.
Yeah, and a lot of managers don't know what to say and do. So we've devised a guide to help managers and staff, and it's about, you know, them being able to signpost to talk about what they can offer their staff, because there's so much support out there. But and during the pandemic, if you remember, there was so much stuff put out there. But when you're at your lowest, it's to navigate through all the different services is really difficult. So to actually have somebody that's going to reach in and support you and hold the manager's hand to support the member of staff, if you like, to tell them, and have one number and then they support that person is really important, and get that member of staff back to work safely and kindly and support them back in work, because some people will be caring for dying people, as you say, especially if you work within palliative and end-of-life care, and those emotions and that memory of losing your loved one, you know, could come up, and it could be very upsetting when you're caring for somebody. So having that outlet really to talk to somebody and that peer support, and you know, we don't know how that person feels, and we should never say that, because you know, it is easy, isn't it, when say somebody's lost their father's died, and my dad died, and it is easy to want to say, you know, I know how you feel, but we don't. You know, grief is unique, and their relationship with their dad is different to the relationship I had with my dad. I only know how I feel, but that peer support, that you've been through something similar and you're there for them and you're listening and supporting them is really key, I think.
Yes, and I think, I mean, we allude to about the communication skills. A lot of what we learn over the years as healthcare staff is that experiential learning, isn't it? Every time you experience a death or you communicate, whatever we do, build up all that wealth of experience and knowledge and learn. I remember hearing a consultant years ago and how he had a Breaking Bad news discussion with a patient, and I remember just being sort of in awe, and little bits that he said at the time I took away and used in the rest of my career, because you know, when you are a new nurse, it's, you know, death is difficult. It's difficult to know what to say and how to support somebody. So all those experiential learning episodes are so vital, aren't they, and shape us who we are, good and bad, because obviously we know people, as I say, we know people don't get it right. So seeing when it doesn't go so well equally can be a positive to the person listening and thinking, well, I would never say it like that or do that.
Yeah, and not being scared of pauses. We always think we have to fill a pause, don't we? But I remember, similar to what you're saying, seeing somebody have a conversation with somebody and get it so right. And there was big pauses. And I was getting quite nervous witnessing this. But, you know, it's about not being scared and don't have to fill a pause. Let that person speak, and really actively listen, not just getting ready for what you're going to say. So
yes.
Yeah.
Thinking in the back of your head. I mean, Catherine Mannix did a great TED talk, didn't she, I think recently, regarding her experience as a junior doctor. And I think we are very fortunate in the time that we are now, that with social media and all these platforms, that shared learning of people who are incredibly experienced is out there that we can watch and use with our staff, isn't it, to help support them and say, you know, this is what somebody who's been doing palliative end-of-life care for a long time. You know, Catherine Mannix has written an awful lot of information about it and does lots of podcasts and TED talks, and it's there. So we're very fortunate, aren't we? How we can.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Kath Mannix a couple of years ago, and I was just sort of, I must tell you that we use your phrases all the time, and she was just so pleased. I'm sure people must say it to her all the time, but you know, she says about tender conversations, doesn't she? We call them open and honest, but I like tender. That's not much better than saying difficult, because if we say to people, have that difficult conversation, they're probably going to put it off because it's going to be difficult. But if we say tender, open and honest, important conversation. So yeah, and you know, that saying she has, sick enough to die, which a lot of us clinicians use in our own way, and just explaining, you know, that diminished need for food and drink and the changes in breathing, and yeah, just we're just so lucky really to have her experience and work, and she shares it so openly, doesn't she?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. We're very fortunate to have people that, and the more we talk about it, you know, somebody like her that shares that, and I know there are others as well, and we've talked to some great people over this week doing the podcasts, and it's the more we talk about it, the better it is, isn't it? And getting all these experiences out, because they are everyone's experience is so diverse, and a lot of people have different things to bring to that table, and yeah, it's been fascinating doing the podcast for myself as a, you know, I am a nurse, but not clinical anymore. But it's just great to hear.
You'll always be a nurse.
I know, but I feel a bit of a fraud now. I'm a computer nurse now. But so I guess the only thing that I'd like to wrap up with is, if you had a wish list, what would be one of your things that you would most like, or not just one, but you'd most like to do or change within your organisation?
Well, we've got so much resource out there for the staff, the SWAN model of care, because it's signs, words, actions and needs. And we gift folders when somebody's diagnosed as dying, and a SWAN bag when somebody dies. And in there is the Good Grief Trust card to signpost them to over 900 organisation resources. I would love for every time, because we've got one chance to get it right, that every time it's gifted. And my worry is that it isn't always gifted. So if I'm involved, or any one of my teams involved, we'll make sure it's gifted. The staff embrace it, but sometimes it might get missed. And then my other wish would be, we've got 23 SWAN rooms. And if I could have a magic wand, I would love one in every ward, which we're not far off it, but I'd also like a skylight in every SWAN room. So this year, our next 12 months, we're developing our SWAN rooms to improve them, repainting them because some of them are 8 years old, and trying to put a skylight in to improve the environment. So that would be my wish list. And you know, it's about the things are there for the staff. We've got to make sure they always use them, always utilise what is available to them. And I know how hard they're working, and a lot of them are absolutely exhausted. But we have one chance to get it right, and we're here to help them do that. So we have champions out there, and they are helping and supporting us out on the wards every day. So a big thank you to everybody, really, that you know, makes a difference in somebody's end of life care, because it makes a massive difference.
Yes, no, I think that's a lovely place to end, because yeah, it's, as you say, you can't be there 24 hours a day, so it's supporting the staff to want to always do the best, and to know how to, and to find out what they need, isn't it? So well done. I think it sounds like, as I say, a great cultural change and a bit of a movement. It does feel like that sometimes with end of life care, doesn't it? It feels like it's a bit of a, we've been dying for years, but it feels like we've got to keep pushing forward with.
Yeah. Can I also just very quickly say that I'd really encourage people to share their good stuff on the Academy of Fabulous stuff as well, because if we can show people what good looks like, they usually try and pinch it with pride, but do it better. So, you know, a bit like the volunteers, I went to Liverpool to find out all about it, and we tried to implement it even better. So I'd really encourage people to share their good stuff so that others can pinch with pride. So thank you so much, Bev.
No, thank you. And I think that's a very good point. We too often work in our own little bubble in hospitals or wherever we might be, and actually it's so important to share. But when you're doing it, sometimes you don't think it's that important or that impressive, and you don't think it's anything different. So I think that's a good reminder that the importance, whatever it may be, the more we share, the better the experience for everybody. So thank you so much for your time today, Jules. It's been lovely to meet you, and I look forward to hearing of your more ideas over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.